All right, so for a previous exercise, we had been using filters to alter photographs, right? That's going to have very specific uses. Maybe a blur will come in handy. Some of these more artsy ones, maybe less so. They're very, very stylized, they're very specific, but they're still altering a photograph. But there are other ways to use filters. So our next assignment is, I call it textures with filters. I didn't know how else to, but it's basically creating textures. These are abstract textures, and these are the kinds of things that I use a lot. So these are some examples, and they are things that people created, starting either with an image of some sort or just a couple of generated things, a couple of swirls with a paintbrush, and then they applied a lot of filters to them. And so this one started off with a clouds generator. We're going to do this one together, or one like it together, and then added other filters on top of it, right? This one used 4 filters, this one used 5 filters. So it started off with render clouds, and then it just kept going. But these types of things can be very, very useful in adding textures and definition and depth to your work. And while these are ones that were created by professionals, I also have some that were created by students. So these were using the same process, right? A student made these, and these can be used for again, just adding, I'm not sure why this one's titled, but for adding textures to things, right? So some people, you can see all these purple ones, they were kind of made by the same person, so that person wanted to stick with a certain look for things, but then other people, like these first few, very, very different ones. And the way this works is, we're going to not save that, we're going to follow the instructions that are actually laid out here. Oh, it jumped around a little bit. There we go. Follow the instructions that are laid out here. Just like with the filters assignment, it's going to all be on the same file. And we're starting out at 2x3 with 150 dpi because we don't want the file to be very big, and it doesn't need to be. So we start new. We say, make sure it says inches, not 2 pixels. 2 inches by 3 inches, 150 dpi. RGB, transparent background, create. And then the next part of the instructions actually says to check what the colors are on the swatches. Now, this matters depending on what you're doing. So if we're using the cloud generator to come up with like an initial set of things, then this definitely matters because the cloud generator is going to look at these colors. If we're just using this to paint with, then you make it to whatever colors you want to paint with, right? But the cloud generator is actually going to use both these colors. I should go brighter on the other color. I gotta learn to use bright colors. All right, so we're going to make this a smart object, even though it's a blank layer. We're going to go to filter, and these are under render clouds. Now you'll notice there's no settings. So the cloud generator is only just bang, just generates stuff. So if I want this to look different, I double click the word clouds, different clouds. There's really no settings to this one in particular. It just gives you a starting point based on the colors that you have. And then if I was to look at this, it says ink outline, so maybe I'll try ink outlines. But you choose your foreground and background colors, you convert the layer to a smart object, filter, render clouds, and then you use just an assortment of filters based on whatever you want to try. So we can try that ink one if it even still exists. Some of these files are a little bit on the old side. I'm not even seeing it listed, so that's great. Let's see if there's another one we can look at. Ink outlines is maybe it's under here. Some of them are under the filter gallery, so we need to kind of twirl these down and see what's available. Texture, and we can choose, oh, there it is, ink outline. And so you can see what a huge difference that makes to the color. So we've got this cloud generator, and some of these are pretty similar, like all these are pretty similar, but then a couple of them, ooh, I like that one, I like that one. They do very different things. So we're going to turn the black intensity down. We're going to change the balance. No. There we go. So we start off with that clouds generator just so we can have something to work with, and then we could apply other filters to it, but I don't like how pixelated this looks, so I'm also going to add a Gaussian blur because I want it to be cloudy and poofy looking. I don't want it to be all sharp edged and what have you, right? And we can start to get more of an abstract look to things. And we can kind of just stack these to do whatever we want. Some of these, I've said it in previous videos, some of the distort things are like, I'm not a fan of. They're a little bit too much. But you can make them work to your advantage, depending on what you do. Not my favorite to go with this one, but there are other places I've used it. So, but if you tone them down a little bit, and if you're using them with something abstract, they become much more valid, because this is not a photograph that we're then adding a zigzag to, which is some silliness. This is something very abstract. So the rules of what you can do to push it are very, very different. Oh no, that's not gonna work with this. Let's try Stylize. See, so, and the order you put these in changes the order of, or changes what it looks like. I can change this order, so I can put the Gaussian blur last, so it blurs the oil painting, or I can put the oil painting even before that filter. Wow, okay, so what's happening is I took the clouds, then apply the oil painting, and then when you apply that weird filter gallery thing I put on, it's applying it to those itty bitty oil paintings rather than before where it was applying it to the whole big clouds. So you can see how it matters a great deal what order you put this in. There you go. There's an interesting texture. And just by trying that stuff a little bit, and now that I have a different look, I can go back in and maybe change my settings a little. Ooh. See what it is I want to do differently. Maybe I don't want there to be a lot of that dark stuff. Maybe I just want it to be, but I still want it to be finely textured. Dark strokes. Oh no, that's what it's set to. There we go. Nope, I don't want the blur. If I have this really fine, then I don't want that blur on it. But now I've got this abstract texture I can work with, and I can apply this as a texture, using these different blend modes and different opacities and things. I could apply this to, let's say, a really flat area that I need to have a texture on it. I have used this in real life. I have used this type of thing in my real life work, both student and professional. So this is a thing. This is a thing you can use, especially if you're starting in Illustrator and maybe want stuff to look a little more like handmade. So I have a few examples here of stuff students have done, so you can see how they kind of went through things and figured it out. So there we go. And these collapse, by the way, so you can kind of twirl these up so you don't have to look at everything. But if I turn off the filters, you can see that they didn't always start with the clouds. This person just came up with a brush and went squiggle, 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 and once they applied the filters, there we go, it looks like this. And I think most of hers, do stuff like those. Might actually be her brushes that she made in another week. Cross hatches turns into something like this. So you don't have to start with the clouds. You can start with whatever you want. That's the leaf brush, right? And add enough things to it and it will look very, very, very different. That one doesn't look as different. This person, this is the other thing you can do, as long as the images you are choosing are copy legal. So this person would actually start with, well, this one started with nothing, but sometimes they started with images. Here we go. So they would start with some sort of abstract image. right? There's all sorts of image galleries online that are copy legal that you can use when I say you're allowed to for an assignment, and this is one of those assignments. And when you start with those, that one you can kind of tell what it is. There we go. So if you apply enough things to it, it becomes something different. So that would be the key. We would want to apply enough stuff to whatever we're starting with that we can't really tell what it is anymore. This one, that started as brush strokes. This actually, what did this start as? Ah, there you go. I wouldn't have guessed that. This is a gradient. She just applied a gradient that repeated over and over and then just did enough stuff. It ended up looking like that. This started life as a graphic, but it doesn't look anything like the graphic anymore, right? That's a huge change. This one is actually one of my favorites. So it starts like this, and then she added noise, and then the spheroid thing to kind of stretch it a little bit. The sharpen makes the contrast a little bit higher, I think. And then the extrude completely changes it, but then also when you add an oil paint to it. And some of those ones underneath do make changes. The sharpen one is probably the least changey, but the noise, taking away the noise, changes the color overall, and taking away the spheroized one actually completely changes which colors are where. So it can seem sometimes like the underneath ones get hidden, but they're still there. They're still doing stuff. This one also started life. Oh, she forgot to do the. This one started life as clouds, but she forgot to do the smart object, so we can't exactly see how she built it up. But these are all done by students. All of these started life as student things. And so you can get really interesting textures and patterns from this. So what I want you to do is, these instructions are here to get you started. You don't always have to start with clouds. You can start with your own scribbles. You can start with copy legal images that you found on the internet. So this one, number 4 here, is going to change depending on what you're doing. Distortion and texture filters or filter gallery work really well. And then you can change the order of them to make them different, and then make your own custom patterns, 6 of them. This should not say 6 new files. I can change that. It should say 1 file and then 6 layers, or 6 groups of layers, depending on how you want to do it, right? Because otherwise you're going to be handing in 6 files, which is a lot of work. All right, so we want to have 6 different textures. Make sure they're abstract. Make sure they're not looking like the original thing very much. We want them to look different, like something you couldn't draw necessarily very easily. These are things you're not going to draw by hand, but they can be very, very useful, especially this one. This can be very, very useful in real life. All right.